SS General Hans Kammler, the man in charge of Hitler's so-called weapons of revenge, missiles, nuclear projects, jet planes. He created an empire of bomb-proof facilities and underground factories to produce Germany's top-secret weapons. One of the most powerful figures in Nazi Germany, yet hardly known.
It's clear that Kammler saw his job as creating weapons for the Third Reich to use against its enemies to win the war, and nothing, no loss of life was too great a price to pay for that.
One of his prior briefs was the construction of death camps. It's alleged that he committed suicide in the final days of the war. Yet recently found documents indicate that he survived. Was he whisked off by the Americans for the knowledge he could provide? Did this spare him being charged as a war criminal at the Nuremberg trials? His fate is still one of history's enigmas. Hans Kammler, proud father and family man, yet at the same time an unscrupulous technocrat in the Nazis' armament and murder machinery. Officially, the Lieutenant General of the SS took his own life in May 1945, while on the run near Prague.
It is known that on the night of May the 3rd, Kammler and his staff were near a place called Ebensee. He gave orders to proceed to an office of his department in Prague. After the war, his driver and one of his adjutants stated that Kammler went with them. In Prague, they said they were caught up in the general insurrection and that Kammler joined the final retreat of the German troops. When he realized that his situation was hopeless, he allegedly killed himself.
In the final days of the war, American troops advance into Czech territory, where they're hailed as liberators. All across the country, the hunt is on for the former occupiers, be they soldiers or civilians. Bands of Czech militia are out for revenge. Witnesses from Kammler's SS entourage later testify in front of a German court that Kammler had seen no way out and taken his own life, biting on a cyanide capsule. Some state that he had shot himself, others that he had given orders that he be shot. As for the place, accounts differ. In all, there are 6 different versions of his demise. However, his body was never found. Neither his dog tag nor any of his personal effects were ever recovered.
After the war, his wife, Julia Kammler, tried to clarify her husband's fate, since she was almost without any means and needed confirmation of his death. She contacted some of his former comrades, yet their statements proved conflicting. What finally decided the verdict of the Berlin District Court was the testimony of Kammler's second driver, who claimed that Kammler had committed suicide on May the 9th. Based on that, the court declared Kammler to be officially dead.
Yet new evidence has turned up which has led to growing doubts about the official version of Kammler's end.
There are several documents, hitherto unknown, which in my view conclusively prove that Kammler did not kill himself in the final days of the war, but that he was captured by the Americans.
A former high-ranking female SS member wrote to Kammler's wife, informing her that her husband was still in Prague the day before the war ended, and took his leave from her with the words,
"The Americans are after me. They have made me offers. Never will I serve the enemy. They won't get me alive."
Just a smokescreen? The intelligence services of the victors are well aware that the SS general had deep insights into Germany's most modern weapons technology. They're especially interested in the so-called miracle weapons of the Third Reich, so they're eager to get hold of Kammler and his knowledge. But as the Allies enter Germany, they also realize that tens of thousands of concentration camp prisoners fell victim to Kammler's construction program, and that he played a prominent part in designing the death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. The British Secret Service even put him on a death list, along with 9 other top-level SS men who were targeted for assassination by commando units. Instead, according to recent evidence, Kammler ended up in American custody. A high-ranking operative at the Office for Strategic Services, OSS for short, is said to have supervised and interrogated him. Donald Richardson was serving with an OSS special unit. In 2014, one of his sons revealed for the first time that Kammler had indeed been in US custody.
My father interviewed him. Is you change a person. You can change a good German and hide him from Russian intelligence. That was my father's job.
So what really happened in those final days of the war? Did Kammler intend to cooperate with one of the victorious Allies? To hand over data about the latest developments in arms technology in return for a new life? Until now, official records state that Kammler's life ended in May 1945, and with it, an unparalleled rise through the ranks of the SS. Historian Matthias Uhl has evaluated the day planner of SS chief Heinrich Himmler. The name Kammler features regularly among his appointments.
Hans Kammler was a typical example of many young SS officers who saw the organization as a springboard for a career. Having studied architecture and civil engineering, he had a sound technical background and was driven by the desire to advance quickly. And the SS offered him the opportunity to do so.
The Black Order, the self-proclaimed elite of the Third Reich. Those who join their ranks with unconditional loyalty can go far. Relentlessly, the SS strives to widen its influence. Their leader is always on the lookout for ambitious talents. Men like Hans Kammler, who is soon on a steep rise.
In 1941, he is assigned to the construction branch of the SS and quickly becomes head of Department C, which is responsible for all important building projects. And in the context of these widespread activities, he manages to seize ever more competences in all sorts of fields.
With the war in full swing, Kammler wants to show his mettle behind the front.
A few weeks after he had taken charge of Department C, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. As the campaign progressed, the tasks of the construction department, within the SS Economic Administration main office, multiplied. They ranged from building new POW camps to new SS barracks and many other things.
Kammler's brief also takes him into occupied Poland, to a site which has become the symbol of industrialized mass murder, Auschwitz-Birkenau. He doesn't just sign the construction plans for the crematoriums of the gas chambers. He also personally devises the layout of the rail tracks so that the distance between train and gas chamber is as short as possible.
Kammler was deeply involved in all of this. Together with Himmler, he observed the first killings by gas in Auschwitz, since his department was in charge of building the crematoriums and ovens.
Mass murder as a mere technical challenge, without any scruples.
If I fulfill this task effectively and in accordance with the orders I have received, I can rise even higher. That's what he must have thought, and obviously this was all that mattered to him.
And indeed, in the eyes of the SS leadership, Kammler seems the natural choice to take over Germany's secret weapons program. The army testing range at Peenemünde on the Baltic coast is the site of feverish activity, aimed at the production of weapons capable of reaching the enemy's cities unhindered, in spite of Allied air superiority. At Peenemünde, the Aggregate 4, a ballistic missile, later called the V2, is being developed under the authority of the Ministry of Armament. Himmler is hell-bent on getting hold of the new technology and the scientists involved. Yet the men around rocket pioneer Wernher von Braun are reluctant at first.
When
Peenemünde is destroyed by British bombers in August 1943, Kammler is immediately tasked with creating alternative underground facilities near Nordhausen. He succeeds in just 2 months. And he stops at nothing, which means lives don't matter.
Kammler orders several kilometers of tunnels to be driven into the Harz Mountains. Since he's in charge of the construction, he soon manages to seize control of any arms production underground, and finally of the overall missile program. Meanwhile, forced laborers and concentration camp inmates are herded into the tunnels to expand the facilities in conditions that defy description. Tens of thousands die. Barbarism and state-of-the-art technology, the two worlds of Hans Kammler. He becomes one of the most powerful members of the SS, responsible for dozens of top-secret construction sites, consisting of several 100,000 square meters of bomb-proof factories throughout the Reich. As illustrated by a rather mundane document, Kammler's personal roadmap. It's full of dots, crosses and dashes, each signifying a different site in Kammler's realm. Like Lehesten in Thuringia, where a quarry is turned into a plant for V2 propulsion units with underground production lines and test stands. Kammler creates an immense network of technical facilities. His superiors are full of praise for him. He had
accomplished an achievement unique in this field until now, and managed to considerably reduce the set dates for completion, even in the face of initial difficulties. Signed, Heinrich Himmler.
In recognition of this, Himmler assigns Kammler as SS Special Emissary to the A4 project, i.e. the ballistic missile program. Yet he soon takes on additional responsibilities, including the development of jet fighters. So he's familiar with almost all important weapons projects of the Reich.
June 1944. Hitler's Fortress Europe is crumbling. The troops of the Western Allies storm the beaches of Normandy. The final chapter of the war has begun. However, the Germans fight on, and they still have a few aces up their sleeve.
To the Germans, it was clear the clock was ticking. We can't hold the front much longer, so we have to bring in new weapons. And for this, we need a man who will stop at nothing to get things done as quickly as possible. And that was, I think, the part they had in mind for Kammler.
Accordingly, his brief is extended from overseeing the development to the actual operation of the missiles. In early September 1944, the first V2s are launched, directed at Great Britain. Since they are far from accurate, it's impossible to pinpoint military targets. They're intended to spread terror by appearing seemingly out of nowhere, killing indiscriminately, in London as well as in liberated Antwerp. But as vicious and deadly as they might be, they are no substitute for air power. As the Allies break out from Normandy, all missile bases under construction along the French coast are abandoned. Like this one near the Pas de Calais. It's a gigantic cupola of concrete. Called the Dome, it's 30 meters wide and deep, with a ceiling of ferro concrete 5 meters thick. intended for the launch of a whole range of missiles of varying size with warheads carrying a devastating payload. The dome was supposed to be able to launch 70 missiles a day. The Allies captured the site just in time. For the Germans, it's a race against time. Blueprints and key materials from secret arms factories near the ever-constricting front lines are hurriedly transported into the Reich. Kammler plans to concentrate experts and key equipment in southern Germany. His task is to deny the Allies access to vital research and examples of Germany's secret weapons arsenal for as long as possible. In his search for possible sites, Kammler focuses on the Bavarian and Austrian Alps. Unbeknownst to the Germans, their radio traffic is intercepted and deciphered by the Allies. One of their reports concludes that much of Kammler's attention will be given to redistribution of equipment and supplies. He also gives orders to detail forced laborers and concentration camp inmates to the new sites. Numerous scientists and their families are being evacuated and brought south. Yet traveling in Germany these days is wrought with danger. Rail and road traffic are fair game for Allied strafers. What's more, photo reconnaissance planes bring back unmistakable evidence of the extent of the redeployment effort. Their pictures show fully loaded trains up to 500 meters long, like this one near Linz in Upper Austria. American units advance into Germany, one of their briefs, to look for possible sites of underground arms production. Like Ohrdruf in Thuringia, another cross on Kammler's roadmap. Ohrdruf is one of the Nazis' so-called special construction projects. Even today, no files referencing the site have been found, only a few hints about its inspection by US units, when a reconnaissance patrol encounters a booby trap. In April 1945, the Americans reached the underground missile factories in central Germany. What they see is both disconcerting and fascinating. The Germans seem to be ahead in missile technology by at least 10 years. Yet, there are also images of their contempt for humanity in this underworld of mass-produced rockets. The Allies soon shift their focus to the men behind the technology and its facilities. Each of the victorious powers is hell-bent on getting hold of their know-how. Of factories, laboratories, test ranges and blueprints, which may shed light on the most recent developments in the arsenal of modern warfare. Special units are following hard on the heels of the advancing troops. There are reports which gravely worry the Americans. The Germans, they imply, are preparing for a last stand in the Alps, especially the SS. The Bavarian and Austrian mountains are ideally suited for defensive warfare. At the OSS branch in Swiss Bern, they are alarmed. The talk is of the Alpine Redoubt. What if several 100,000 heavily armed Germans dug in here now that the war seems almost won? American fears border on the grotesque. The Alps, a mountain fortress full of fanatical diehards, supported by the latest state-of-the-art weapons from Hitler's secret arms factories. It's definitely a worst-case scenario.
That this horrible idea, because it represented a nightmare for Allied military strategists, that this horrible idea started to gain currency. And it's by the spring of 1945 that the very top of the Allied military command, General Eisenhower himself, is convinced that this war in Europe won't end without a bloody guerrilla war in the mountains of southern Bavaria and Austria.
What if hitherto unknown weapons were brought to bear?
The Germans had indeed redeployed a considerable part of their secret developments to the Alpine region. Among them, missiles, jets, and, it seems, parts of their nuclear research program, as well as several other special projects about which there is little known and which are shrouded in myths.
The fact is that Kammler repeatedly met Hitler one-on-one and was given full powers as special weapons executive by the Führer and his Air Force chief, Hermann Göring. Some blueprints were personally signed by Kammler. For instance, the so-called high-pressure pump, intended to fire artillery shells over a range of 400 kilometers and capable of saturating large areas. However, it didn't get beyond the planning stage.
So there definitely were the missiles, the jets, and, according to latest research, possibly parts of the nuclear arms program. It had been Kammler's intention to pool these developments in order to finalize these projects in spite of the Allied advance.
The Third Reich and the atom bomb. While the cream of Germany's nuclear physicists has long been driven into exile, there are several branches of the armed forces, the telecommunications service, and the SS who seem to have been active in this field.
It's clear to me that scientists working under the authority of the SS or with the SS were trying to make new sorts of weapons to the very end of the war. It's not clear that these weapons were actually effective, that they actually worked, but it seems pretty clear that they were trying to make them.
The actual state of Germany's nuclear research is still a matter of dispute. However, in the final days of 1944, Allied intelligence services believed that a German small-scale atom bomb is a distinct possibility. Soviet intelligence even reports on a series of tests with small nuclear devices.
We know from reports by the Soviet military intelligence GRU that Ohrdruf was among the most important sites of German nuclear research. As early as November 1944, a GRU source reported that preparations for nuclear testing had begun. In March 1945, the head of GRU personally briefed Stalin and his closest circle of advisors on 2 nuclear tests that had taken place in Thuringia. There are other sources indicating that Kammler obviously had been present at those tests, because on March the 6th, 2 days after the first test, he meets Himmler and seems to have reported to him on the result. He meets Himmler again on March the 13th, the day after the alleged second test, which again indicates a close connection between Himmler, Kammler, and possible nuclear tests in Thuringia.
Yet what tests could have taken place, and what were the results?
Well, I really only know about Kammler's work with rockets, although I know that he was very aggressive about acquiring control over more and more and more weapon systems. I'm certainly willing, it would make perfect sense that he also was interested in uranium bombs or other things.
The GRU report even describes the blueprint for the alleged bomb. So, could it have worked at all?
As far as I can tell, the design reported in the GRU report appears to be a fully functional implosion bomb design. In fact, there are features in the GRU design that are even apparently more advanced than the US design. So it seems to be the product of a very large and very long-running program.
Yet even if the bomb might work in theory, how is it supposed to go off without a significant amount of highly enriched material capable of causing a fission?
One possible way to initiate the chain reaction might be to have a particle accelerator, a betatron in this case, perhaps mounted on the outside of the bomb. That particle accelerator would send 6 million electron volt electrons toward the center of the bomb at the moment that the bomb starts to implode, as described in the GRU report. And then those 6 million electron volt gamma rays would cause some of the uranium nuclei in the center of the bomb to fission.
Yet no proof of even the slightest enrichment of uranium by the Germans has ever been found. Doubts remain. Reports of Hitler's bomb appear first and foremost in Allied Secret Service reports.
Die SS-Führung hat sehr lange, zumindest bis Ende 1944.
At least until late 1944, the top brass of the SS had placed their hopes on still being able to win the war by using new weapons. They aimed for a combination of missiles and weapons of mass destruction. They wanted to load the V2 or its successors with poison gas or radioactive material, and the Allies did indeed fear precisely that.
Das war das Ziel. Und die Alliierten hatten davor auch Angst.
Allied strategic aerial reconnaissance under US General MacDonald closely monitors one of Kammler's most important sites, Sankt Georgen near Linz in Austria. Photo interpreters notice extensive excavation work, as well as hints at underground activities. Their conclusion: redoubt, no doubt. However, it's not a bunker system for the Alpine fortress, but part of a subterranean network of factories. It's made up of several complexes. Again, Kammler's roadmap bears witness to their locations. Delivery protocols of the Reichsbahn, the state-owned railroad, list them as destinations of transports from secret weapons factories. Some are even addressed to Kammler personally. Trains from Fallersleben, for instance, the largest production site of V1 flying bombs. Or from Limburger Hof, a research facility of IG Farben, notorious for the development of chemical warfare agents. Or from Ohrdruf, the alleged site of nuclear tests. Everything points to the area around Gusen in Upper Austria.
Das Besondere an Gusen ist eben,
the focus on Gusen derives from the fact that, at least from 1943 onward, the SS had begun to create a significant industrial complex there, in cooperation with notable armament enterprises such as the Steyr-Daimler-Puch firm. These were large-scale projects, with a view to providing maximum security.
In a network of tunnels 8 kilometers long, as the Austrian authorities still state officially. Yet American documents hint at facilities of up to 26 kilometers in length. They explicitly refer to Gusen as Sankt Georgen.
Immediately after the war, members of the American top brass, as well as military intelligence officers, inspected the facilities and wrote their reports. One of these reports mentions a length of 26 kilometers. So there must have been something here that bothered Kammler so much that he left Berlin and came here. And this could only have been a matter of the highest priority, i.e. a vital project in the secret weapons arsenal.
American reports mention a 3-facility complex at Sankt Georgen, and refer to 4 further underground installations near the concentration camp at Gusen. There are few eyewitnesses left to tell of what happened at the time. A photograph of a former commandant of Camp Gusen, Karl Chmielewski. His son Walter was 15 years old in 1944 and overheard SS men talking shop.
There was talk of a total 30 to 40 kilometers of tunnels that had been laid out, partly on 2 levels. Or that's what transpired in talks with SS men. Since we were living in the SS village, there was always some SS personnel we could talk to. There was always talk of an underground concentration camp and that it had 2 levels. One for the factory and the second one where the concentration camp workers had to live, without any daylight. And as for ventilation, there were merely air shafts. That was basically common knowledge among SS personnel.
Yet the official history of the concentration camp complex, Mauthausen-Gusen, makes no mention of any underground camp.
The idea of a subterranean concentration camp is to be treated with the utmost caution. Yet there is some evidence for it.
US intelligence reports quote witnesses who not only mentioned the production line for missiles at Gusen, but also stated that
in December 44, it was planned to keep workers inside the factory at all times, using artificial sunlight to keep them in good health. The plan was devised to eliminate the frequent breaches of security which had occurred.
An entry into the railroad delivery protocols in January 1945 provides additional evidence. It refers to a delousing facility for the tunnel complex BA3, codenamed Mountain Crystal. This too suggests accommodation underground.
It's understandable
that the prisoners should be kept closed in and underground to maintain secrecy. That's indicated by the intelligence reports, which have been accessible in the USA for some time. It's also indicated by the eyewitness account of the son of the camp commandant. Then there are those strange transports to Gusen. And there are the aerial photographs, which are also available to us. So there's plenty of evidence to follow up. If there had been an underground concentration camp for prisoners from Poland or Russia or from wherever, it would be a story so unbelievable it defies the imagination that presumably thousands of human beings must have perished here.
A survivor recalls at least one camp underground.
The day after we came to the camp at Mauthausen, 10 of us, all technical experts, were immediately selected. And the next day we were brought to Gusen, where at Gusen 3 there was a camp that was underground.
German files about the secret weapons production at Sankt Georgen don't mention a concentration camp, but they refer to the relocation of the workforce into bomb-proof tunnels. Original blueprints of the Mountain Crystal facility show a 13-meter-high tunnel with 2 levels separated by an intermediate ceiling of concrete.
That's directly linked to the process of placing a factory underground. The underground camp was part of the production facilities. The machinery, all the hardware, and the raw materials were underground, and so were the workers. That's where this theory of there having been an underground camp for the workers came from. Their working hours would have been spent at the production line, and when at rest, their accommodation would have been in the tunnels too. They were meant as a shelter for the workers. That's how it was planned from the very beginning.
An American report of a post-war inspection of the facilities bears the annotation Plan of Underground Camp Sankt Georgen. But was there more than a plan?
This file on underground camps that has turned up proves that it is still possible to find new documents. This calls for further thorough research, which, by the way, is something we owe to those who were forced to toil down there as forced laborers.
Kammler kept a tight control on his secret weapons projects.
Kammler was here quite often. He even came to our flat. I know that because my mother frequently said, "Oh yes, Kammler," and the like. He definitely was at St. Georgen repeatedly.
It's known that Gusen was an assembly plant for jet planes. Yet, were there other secret weapons projects underground?
fokussiert.
In local historical research, Gusen II is dealt with almost exclusively as a production site for Me-262 jets or their components.
Flugzeugen oder Großkomponenten dafür.
It's interesting, however, that foreign authors time and again mention V-1 and V-2 missiles as at least being on a par with Me-262 production.
262 auch V1 und V2 nennt,
that there had been experimental models of rockets, of high-velocity missiles. In fact, we know that the wind channel of the Technical University at Graz had been relocated to Gusen.
On site in one of the few tunnels of the Mountain Crystal facility at Sankt Georgen that are still accessible, Walter Kmielewski recalls underground constructions of up to 30 kilometers in length.
Over here were parts of aircraft fuselages and also of rocket fuselages.
Even rockets?
Definitely.
What type? Could you...
I'd say V2, I can't...
And their size? Circa?
Oh, mein Gott. Goodness, I think...
Like a rain barrel? Or larger?
I'd say about a meter wide.
Circa, but round?
Yes, yes.
Not oval?
No, a meter wide and round, and maybe 12 meters long approximately.
That's interesting.
So definitely.
According to Walter Kmielewski, SS men talked about even more sensational goings-on at Gusen.
The entire production was to be halted with a view to converting it into nuclear research. That was more or less common knowledge.
And that was about when? When did this order reach Sankt Georgen?
The order arrived mid or late 1944.
The actual state of nuclear research at Sankt Georgen has not yet been ascertained. As the armies of the Western Allies advance, they're accompanied by special units whose task is to search for Hitler's miracle weapons. Reports of their intelligence services mention a directive from the Ministry of Armament.
All scientific research on weapons in Germany will cease, except that which concerns itself with weapons of a revolutionary character, which in themselves might be battle winners, if not war winners, for Germany.
From 1943 onwards, the so-called miracle weapons were given top priority. Albert Speer, the Minister for Armament since 1942, was a driving force behind that. And of course, Gusen might well have been one of the sites chosen for their production. And I think this is where we must bring together, on the one hand, the secret weapons projects, such as V2 production and nuclear fission, in other words, uranium, and on the other hand, the deployment of forced laborers and concentration camp inmates. Because in the Third Reich, their lives really counted for nothing.
At his final meeting with Armaments Minister Albert Speer, Kammler allegedly said that he intended to buy his way out in return for the most modern technology.
He more or less told Speer, I've got the rockets, the jets, and probably, although it was not explicitly mentioned, knowledge of nuclear arms research. These are the trumps I can use against the Americans, since everybody knew that the Americans, as well as the Soviets, had a keen interest in German state-of-the-art technology.
Wernher von Braun, the mastermind behind the V2, has long since decided to turn himself over to the Americans. On orders of Kammler, he and his team assemble near Oberammergau in Bavaria. When the Americans capture von Braun and his men, he knows what he has to offer. His only mishap, a broken arm, is the result of a car accident. But what happened to the former chief of the missile program? Officers of the OSS and the CIC, the US Army's counterintelligence corps, are searching occupied Germany for the brains behind the Nazis' technology. Hans Kammler allegedly took his own life near Prague on May 9, 1945. Yet, did he leave the Alpine region at all? Recently found documents indicate that Kammler was captured by the Americans and interrogated by the CIC. In 1949, the US Denazification Office in Germany orders an investigation into the CV of Hans Kammler, officially presumed dead since 1948. The report bears the signature of one Oskar Packer. He states that
on May 9, 1945, subject was arrested by American troops at the Messerschmitt works at Oberammergau together with his staff. Subject's presumed suicide, as confirmed by witnesses, is disproved by the precise statements of CIC on his capture and escape in May 1945.
Packer verweist auf einen Bericht der amerikanischen Spionageabwehr.
Packer cites an intelligence report according to which Kammler gave himself up on May 9, 1945 to the CIC.
Mai 1945 ergeben. Und da würde ich doch dazu neigen.
In view of this, I'm rather inclined to give more weight to the American documents than to the statements of Kammler's entourage, who may have been instructed to create a red herring for Kammler's disappearance by staging a suicide.
Eine Art Verschwinden Kammlers, einen Selbstmord zu inszenieren.
Yet what about Kammler's alleged escape and him now possibly being in the hands of the Soviets?
Das ist sozusagen ganz normale Alltagspraxis von.
That's common practice of secret services all over the world. I figure this to be a kind of cover-up to explain Kammler's disappearance.
Das Verschwinden Kammlers zu erklären.
New finds from Kammler's private archive have produced further clues. In the final days of the war, Kammler was carrying important blueprints and files concerning Germany's latest arms developments. Protocols on his roadmap allow his route to be traced back. And he has a letter delivered to his wife, which doesn't give the impression of being a final farewell.
I owe it to you that I have been able to brave all of this out. Be assured that we will meet again. I do not in the least intend to take away the final support from all those entrusted to me by being a coward and taking my own life. On the contrary, now more than ever, I believe that the Führer and the Reichsführer SS had the best intentions, and by their sacrifice have created a new base. I can only thank you time and again for what you have been to me, and always will be.
Interrogation transcripts and reports provide further clues as to the movements of the SS general. They sum up a sequence of events beginning on May 4, 1945. On that day, near the concentration camp complex of Gusen-Mauthausen, Kammler and his driver, Friedrich Baum, apparently leave the convoy destined for Prague. That same day, they seem to run into an ambush. Kammler's driver is severely injured. Documents show that on May 23rd, Baum is in American custody at Castle Cumberland near Gmunden in Austria, a former military hospital and now seat of the CIC. Baum's medical file. Renowned forensic pathologist Christian Reiter has examined the document and came upon some perplexing details. Baum succumbs to his injuries 6 days after his arrival. An autopsy is performed. But why? And what about Kammler? This remains a mystery.
There are several contradictions in the file. Date and place of birth, as well as the actual residence, are unclear. And, above all, the physical description of the deceased is extremely vague. A cover-up of the chronology of events would fit in quite well with the assumption that a secret service may have been interested in squaring the identity of another person with Baum's name.
Another US report states that Kammler was interrogated by the CIC at that time and at the very place where his driver died, at Gmunden.
Things get even more dubious given the fact that this man was buried at the Protestant cemetery of Gmunden in grave number 111. According to another entry, however, he was put to rest in grave number 112. So, apparently, there are two graves. And rumor has it that when the French military had them opened, both were empty.
And indeed, there are two graves, and according to their crosses, in each of them lies Friedrich Baum. One born in 1906, and another in 1910. Except that there isn't even one body, and no explanation either. Both Baum and Kammler seem to have vanished, and both are officially presumed dead. Meanwhile, history enters a new stage. In the summer of 1945, the victors meet at the Potsdam Conference to decide on the future world order. Among those present is a high-ranking intelligence officer who is said to have been charged with getting hold of Kammler.
Der Offizier Donald Richardson war ein persönlicher
Donald Richardson was a close confidant of the Western Allies' Supreme Commander, General Eisenhower. So he would have been Eisenhower's man for special missions.
als die großen Konferenzen stattfanden.
Richardson was present at the conferences of the Big Three, Stalin, Churchill and Roosevelt, acting as security officer.
Sicherheitsoffizier dabei.
This shows that he must have enjoyed the trust of the President and his Supreme Commander. Only such a man would be tasked with special missions which comprised state secrets of the highest order.
Die höchste Staatsgeheimnisse beinhalten.
Only when already on his deathbed in 1997 did Richardson reveal to his sons that he had been ordered to secure Kammler's knowledge for the American side. In 2014, his son John recalled what his father told him about those final days of the war.
He couldn't talk about it. This is 70 years now. So we're here to tell a story. We may reveal some secrets. We're here to take a man who died, or is said to have died 6 times. I'm here to tell you that my father interviewed him after his 6th death. I asked my father if he interviewed Hans Kammler. He said yes. This man, Hans Kammler, Dr. Ing, brought treasure from Austria and the German Third Reich to North America and to the United States that served the development of armaments and implements of war, death and destruction for the entire Cold War, and is the platform for future armament. In the standard way intelligence and counterintelligence works is you change a person. You can change a good German and hide him from Russian intelligence. That was my father's job.
A memo by the British Military Intelligence Service highlights the danger that might arise if Kammler's knowledge became accessible to the Russians, thereby revealing the locations of secret plants in the Soviet-occupied zone.
Kammler berichtete, dass in der Endzeit des Krieges
Kammler stated that, in the final phase of the war, the Germans planned to launch 2 new weapons from Austria. There was talk of rockets with warheads of hitherto unknown destructive force, which were intended to be aimed at Paris.
Die alles bisher Dagewesene übertrifft und die man auf Paris abschießen wollte.
Mere talk? Whatever the case, Donald Richardson seems to have accomplished his mission. Kammler remained in American custody.
So ein kurzer Einblick in die Welt der Geheimdienste.
Even this short look into the world of secret services illustrates that there are things of which we had not the slightest idea until now, or where we are just beginning to lift the veil, especially when it comes to the final days of the war.
Vor allen Dingen auch bei Kriegsende abgespielt hat.
For the first time, newly found archive material reveals written evidence that Kammler was indeed in the hands of the Americans. A document dated May 30th, 1945, lists a number of high-ranking German POWs available for interrogation, among them SS General Hans Kammler. And 5 months later, the head of the American Air Force's intelligence, Brigadier General George C. MacDonald, requires additional interrogations concerning German underground installations. Among those who are to be personally interrogated are Albert Speer and Kammler. The matter of concern, underground areas in the regions of Austria, which are now part of the Soviet-occupied zone. As long as these underground facilities remained intact, they were available for bomb-proof housing of important industries in any future war, the document concludes. Private photographs of the Kammler family during the war. They would never see him again. To his wife and his children, he has been presumed dead since the end of the war. Yet among his offspring, doubts have risen about the circumstances of his demise. If there was a deal with the Americans, this man too might have taken the secret into his grave. In 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower entered office as the 34th President of the United States. Was intelligence on modern arms more important than atonement for war crimes? Only further research into Kammler's time in American custody could provide the answer. His second life didn't last long. According to John Richardson, after 2 years in isolation, the former SS general hanged himself.